this is the interview of Alice Barnham, and it is May 30th, and the interviewer is Brenda Hepler. Okay, and we're asking everybody, what was your first library experience?
My first library experience was on the East Coast in South Orange, New Jersey, and we went weekly. My mother loved books, and our delight was to walk over there and select our books and talk with the librarian and take our books home and have a wonderful read, bring them back, and get the next load. So it started early, very early.
And you did use the word load.
Yeah, I'm a children's bookstore. But in those days we didn't have a car, we carried them. It was the war years.
Yeah, okay. And where did you grow up then for the most part of your life?
I spent all my grade school years in South Orange, New Jersey.
Ah,
so, yes, I had a deep taproot.
And what awareness of community did you have while growing up in this town in New Jersey?
We had a local newspaper, which really kept you up to date with what was going on. My mother was active in the PTA, or Parent Teachers Association as it was called then. And because it was, at least early childhood, the war years, everyone was active in sort of community things. My mother was a neighborhood warden, so that if they had an air raid and the sirens went off, she put on her little helmet and went out and made sure the neighbors turned off their lights and things like that. Plus the fact we talked about it as a family a lot, the importance of community, and we were, in those days you really did visit with your neighbors the old-fashioned way, sitting on a back porch, rocking chairs, exchanging stories and news. It seemed the clock ran slower.
And what was your education? Did you continue on to college?
Yes,
in New Jersey?
I finished my undergraduate degree at the University of Chicago.
You moved west slowly.
Gradually moving west, yes. University of Chicago, Topeka, Kansas.
Oh, really? And then what were your work experiences then after college?
Well, I've learned how big corporations can take forever to make a simple decision. I worked for Prudential Insurance Company in their college training program. I think I spent something like 9 months helping them decide which throwaway ballpoint pen they would order.
And as an adult, what were your early community experiences?
Let's see. Probably the one that taught me a lot about community was my husband's training at the Menninger Clinic in Topeka, Kansas, in psychiatry, because Dr. Menninger, Carl Menninger, was a great believer in community. And he organized everybody into the buddy system. So the older members who had come in the year before kind of looked after the ones that were coming that year. And then it was our turn. And that taught me a lot about community. And it was tight, even though it was the capital of Kansas, Topeka. It was a small community at that time. I don't know what it's like now. And if you went to the symphony, everybody was there. If you went to the foreign film movie, which we ran, everybody was there. So you really gained a sense of the importance of community.
Just a second. There we go. And we came to an end.
We left Kansas.
What attracted you to Lafayette, and how long have you lived here?
Okay. the easy number answers, I guess we're here since 72, so is that about 34 years? And we started out in Berkeley. The years were good there, but it was a difficult time. They were integrating the schools. I got tired of these meetings that went to 2 o'clock in the morning. But that, I could have lived with that. I really began to look to live elsewhere when our older son would run home from intermediate school, wouldn't say hello, and would run into the bathroom to go to the bathroom. And I realized that he was afraid to use the bathrooms in the school. And that was very uncomfortable. And that's when I decided we had to look elsewhere.
The decision was easy. Yeah, okay. And what attracted you to Lafayette then, after Berkeley? I mean, what drew you to Lafayette versus Walnut Creek or Linda?
We actually looked at a number of areas at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
What attracted me to this particular site was our children were young, the schools were nearby. We had lived on the hillside in Berkeley, and I was tired of getting in the car and taking them everywhere.
Yeah.
I thought, here they are, they can walk around town. They could walk down the block and even take themselves, as they got older, to the dentist themselves. So that was one thing. And then I guess it just, the house was appealing. It was just a comfortable, simple, well-appointed house for storage.
Yeah.
And I'm a little bit of a pack rat.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Perfect, okay. And defining the goals of community as a place of mutual support, shared values, and acceptance of difference, how do you see Lafayette meeting those goals relative to difference and values and support?
That's a lot to consider in one or
Question,
two.
I know. Maybe one of those things. Or
Living here now for 34 years, I've seen quite a bit of change, and change that appeals a great deal to me. I see a larger number of different types of people living here, and they seem to be, I mean, my husband has been trying to organize the neighborhood for emergency concerns, and people have been very willing, and in the process we've realized how diverse our little area is, and people seem more than willing to share their expertise and support with each other. So I can't say I had sampled before. That may have all been in place before and I didn't know it, but it was lovely to discover.
And so then you do see a sense of mutually supporting each other.
Yes, I do.
Mm-hmm. And how about shared values?
I don't know if I know enough.
Maybe not just these people, but just in the community in general.
Well, I think the fact that the community came forward and has supported the schools so well, and hopefully they will pass this measure to improve the streets, and that they came forward to build this new library, I think is just remarkable. And I watched that pretty closely.
How do you feel a library serves a community?
Well, I think it's a place that answers a lot of questions for people, just every day-to-day questions of how to manage everyday issues of living. I think it also is a place where, maybe the last place where you can chance to meet your neighbor or an acquaintance unexpectedly, and just the pleasure of it. It seems to be, and we're not the only community, a place where the very harassed young parents, both of whom are working, are having their children kind of live there after school as a safety zone. I can appreciate what they're facing. I'm not sure that's exactly what libraries are meant to be. But I don't, since nothing else has been put in place, I'm awfully glad it's there for the children.
And when you first came to Lafayette, what are your earliest memories of the Lafayette Library in 1972?
I'm trying to remember that. I think I was very pleased that it had a very nice children's section. And I was probably so busy settling in other ways, I didn't, in the first 4 to 6 years, use it that heavily, except I know I always went there to scan the sections on travel if we were going to take off somewhere. They would give me my first source of information, and then I would figure it out from there.
Well, how have you been involved with the library then? You were saying, it took you 6 years. When did you become a member of?
Well, first of all, I think I should thank Alice Johnson. I hope she's been interviewed because she has worked so hard for that library. And, she told me about her effort to get good carpeting into the place, and she spoke. And then when she stepped off the board, she said, you would do me a favor if you would step on. So.
And what year was that?
I can't remember, but it was sometime in the 80s.
Okay.
And I was being careful. I didn't want to get too involved, so I think I took something like an easy post, working with hospitality but I found it absolutely delightful. That monthly meeting when everybody put their best effort into problem solving. It was fun to listen to the librarian and her dreams for the future.
Do you remember that librarian's name?
I don't at the moment.
Okay.
I'm terrible with names. I know we did lose her to illness, and very quickly, and that was very sad.
Do you have any stories that you remember in the times on the board? You were on the board, right?
Right.
In the library. Yeah.
Well, I just remember our puzzling about how to get people drawn into the annual meeting, and we figured even though we made homemade cookies, and that was still the era, it just didn't seem to be enough, to get the numbers out. So that always intrigued me. And then I guess the other thing I remembered was the very fine coaching with whatever job I took, and I believe she's still on the board, from Mary Ann Hoisington. She must have been some teacher because she was so good at helping people understand and work so hard to keep the board functioning well. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot from her.
How many people were on the board, approximately?
I think there were about 14.
14, yeah.
Something in that neighborhood.
Yeah. Have you participated in any other community organizations besides the library?
Yes, I was active in the League of Women Voters, and then also over at Acalanes High School when Proposition 13 killed the budget and it looked like there would be no career center. A group of us recreated the career center. And it was a very interesting and delightful, I guess I was at it for 4 years before I turned it over, or 5 years actually. And all in all, I'm very glad I did it, although at one point I felt very badly about the fact that I attended a large meeting of a lot of career center people, and I felt like a scab. Like somebody who, because many people were still being employed, and I was going there as a volunteer, and I was very threatening to them, as you can imagine. And I thought to myself, this really is sad in terms of community resources. these people were obviously better trained to do what they were doing, and there ought to be a job for them.
Yeah. Now, so when you came in the 70s, then of course that was the 1962 library, and the next questions are pretty much on the beginning of that library. Let's see. How about, were you involved at all in the book sales or the sorting or any of that, those aspects of the library? And like the
Not on a continual basis, but when I went to board meetings and I realized how much was needed in the way of staffing, I would go in, and I would also volunteer for my husband Frank, because we were both astonished the times we went and realized that people who were really too old to be moving heavy boxes were moving heavy boxes. So we would try, get there toward the end of sales and do that.
Right. So in other words, you were on the board, but when the friends needed some extra help, you pitched in.
Of course.
Yes, yes. So it's, I was talking to another woman who's friends at the library, and she's in this book sorting and all that. And she said the conversations are just wonderful.
I can imagine.
Great conversations.
These are people who love books. How could it not
Great
be interesting?
Now, so let's get on now to the new library. Have you been involved with this new library development at all?
Yes, I was there in the years that they were doing the planning.
Oh, really?
And
Is that late 1990s then? Is that
No, it was more earlier in the 90s, I think.
Really? Oh.
And there was I guess there was a 2-year period when I was president of the board. And my particular objective, and I think I succeeded, it's not that I didn't love all the people on the board. I did. I really admired them, and they did tremendous work, but it occurred to me if we were going to have a new library in this community, we needed a lot of people who were a decade or 2 decades younger than we were to be board members. And I put out feelers to the few people I knew in the community who were considerably younger than I to see if they would come on board, and 2 did. And then with their help, the board did become younger.
Or at least have a broader age range.
It had a broader age range, which I thought was absolutely critical if they were going to have a new library.
Yeah. And why is this new library important to you? How did you feel the need?
I thought we had, in size and in location, outgrown this one. It didn't have adequate parking. I don't know who designed it, but it was fraught with difficulties maintaining it. I'll never forget the year of the great rain when it leaked and all our books on one wall fortunately they were all paperbacks and mostly mysteries and could be quickly replaced from other people's collections, but they were gone. They'd been washed out. So it just seemed to me very, necessary. The community, I guess our community population-wise is at full measure. There's a little place where we could expand, I suppose. But because it's along the freeway, it's a very heavily used library by others, Moraga, Walnut Creek, Rossmore.
This library here?
Oh, yes.
Really?
Very heavily used, as it should be. I mean, because we're part of a system.
Right.
We're part of 23 regional libraries. And it just occurred to me that something that has expanded beyond its borders has to consider the fact that it needs more space. Mm-hmm. I love the fact that it's up on First Street and Mount Diablo Boulevard because, in effect, that's exactly where it should be.
Mm-hmm. And how have you participated in its development? I mean, you were head of the board, you're part of the
I went to a lot of the early meetings
Yeah.
and it was quite enjoyable.
And can I just kind of rough dates for that? Is that like early 90s, would you say?
Yeah, I would say that was the 94.
Yeah, okay. Rough.
In that area, 94, 95. And we really worked hard. We went and there are a lot of new libraries in the Bay Area. And we visited most of them, spoke with the librarians, found out the things that worked well, found out the things where they felt errors had been made, and they sure wished they had a second chance to amend what was going on. You know, like these beautiful clerestory windows where the light pours in at the wrong time of day and everybody is blinded who works at the desk to get people checked out, which was true in one library. Or another library where beautiful public space, but they didn't give enough space for the workers behind the scenes, things like that.
Yeah.
So it was good to learn those issues.
Why start with the wheel? Yes, and so then you were the head of the board. This is in the 90s, and then has the development of the new library has progressed, like, you know, after 2000? Have you participated at all in that?
No, I haven't.
So basically, as of, say, approximately 1998 or that thereabouts, you pretty much pulled.
Right. I mean, I've told them they can call me on anything they want me to do on a one-shot or two-shot basis. And I was going to go in for a mailing one Friday, but unfortunately it was also a day I had to have treatment.
Right. Okay. What have you enjoyed the most in participating in the workings of the volunteer side of the library?
I think the problem solving of trying to maintain the library now, and I think we're very fortunate in that we can keep the 1962 library open and running, and then move on into our new building. Sometimes that isn't an option in some places. But you know, I love the interest everybody had in carefully putting money aside every year towards this new library, at the same time realizing that the one we had needed to be maintained, and putting just about an equal sum aside to maintain upgrading of books and magazines and what have you. And I think I was also very impressed with how much the community gave in kind to the library, how the barrels filled with books and videos and DVDs when people, you know, decided that they had enough of them, and the librarian always had first pick, so they could add to their collection, which I thought was very nice. And then the rest went to the book room for resale.
The sales, yeah, but that's great. So I think that pretty much covers what you enjoyed and your best memories. You know, these questions can be a little redundant. And then, what values did your contribution to this library touch that you hold dear?
I think it's the sense of being able to contribute with others and work the democratic process and see that it really does work. And you know, you have your moments where there's a lot of disagreement, but if you stay with it and people manage to get over the emotional side of it, then you get to a new place and you move through it and things are accomplished. I found that very enjoyable and also very mature. It helped me grow up, become.
Yeah, it's a growing process.
Absolutely.
Yeah, forever and ever.
I hope so, well, as long as I have it.
What transformation have you seen in Lafayette since you moved here? And it's kind of it seems like a simplistic question, but it's interesting to see what different people find particularly interesting in this last 30 years or so, 40 years?
Well, I think it's interesting the town trying to reinvent itself. I mean, I love the effort to redevelop the downtown. I can't say it's a difficult town to develop because it's parallel to the freeway and there isn't a great deal of parking. But I think it has gained more character. After all, we have 2 bookstores, a children's bookstore, and Dave runs that wonderful Lafayette bookstore. I'm fascinated by the fact that art has developed so beautifully in this community, that we could devote buildings to art studios and galleries. And I think 2nd Street is fascinating with its craft stores. And so there is, I mean, if you look carefully, there's quite a bit here. And I've come to enjoy it and appreciate it.
Okay, great. Have you noticed an increase in community involvement relative to this new library?
That's a difficult one for me to answer because my own health issues have sort of kept me away from it. I certainly hope so, and the way things are moving. And when I went to their opening festivities, it looked like a large portion and a diverse portion of the community had come out to enjoy it.
Yeah.
So I'm very hopeful. And I thought the little signs on the fence before they got started was charming.
Great.
Just very
That's
charming.
great. What is the most exciting to you about the new library? What aspect of this library, or more than one, of course?
There's quite a few. Well, I think the fact that they've expanded the definition of it being a community center, a consortium. I hope I'm here to see how it plays out with the different groups coming to bringing more educational opportunities to the community, having a place to do that. And I guess being able to bring under one roof the things that were more dispersed, like the book room will be, and the Historical Society will have their chance, and they've worked so hard, you know, to be helpful too, and to see that it happens. So I think the fact that we'll have more space to have more material available to people, and probably, if I remember the design, more distinct spaces where people can pursue activities that are more connected to the internet and things like that, which was much harder in this old library.
Yeah, there's just not enough space.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that goes on to the next question is, it was said the internet would kill the printed word and libraries would become obsolete. How will our new library avoid such a fate?
It's an interesting question, and I've been following it for years now in the New York Times, because they've addressed it too. I think the fact that the librarians we've had for the whole system have looked at the issue and developed such a fine internet connection and have their question and answer format where people can get help almost 24 hours a day is important. I can't speak for the next generation, but I love a book and a bit of paper in front of me. I feel badly for the trees that are destroyed, but there is something special about holding a book and being able to, go back and forth and enjoy it.
I just have to add here a little bit, because I think it's important, because other people, we like the sensuousness of holding a book, and I think that's going to be a very important. I mean, I would just love to even ask little kids that question. I wonder if it has carried on, or is it just that part of.
Well, as I said, I have to be careful, because the generation difference, there is quite a bit there. I mean, my grandniece lived with us for a month this year, and she seems so connected to her laptop and her iPod. So maybe communication is different for that. But she still was more than happy to leaf through all our books and took a couple with her, and so.
And parents are certainly bringing books to their children. I mean,
Yes.
It hasn't gone away.
No, I mean,
First,
obviously not.
No.
That's where we are.
Why do you think then the citizens of Lafayette have responded so enthusiastically to the new Lafayette project, the Lafayette Library project?
I think I'm probably answering the question from my own point of view
That's
again, but I
right
think
here.
they see it as a center. I think I was impressed with the creativity that they say things done in committee are usually not so effective because creativity doesn't get a chance to bubble up to the surface. But I think quite the opposite in this situation. I mean, they went beyond the concept of a square box with books and DVDs and CDs and rooms for computers. I mean, they really saw it as a community center.
Yeah, that's
And
interesting.
I think I think it will be copied. I think it's an amazingly good idea.
And how do you think this library will enhance our sense of community and better serve us as a community?
Well, I think it ties, where it is located, I feel it ties in better to the sense of the downtown. I would guess in time that the area around it, because the movie theater is gone now, and there's that funny little place where the woodcutter's hut once was on First and Golden Gate Boulevard, I could see where that might blend into a kind of a community, more theater art center, if somebody with imagination and a gift for selling the idea and a lot of energy comes into the community. And it just seems to me that whole area could develop beautifully.
And back to this new library better serving the community, you've mentioned several times the location, which I think is definitely a huge
Right.
asset. And how else, can you reiterate maybe a few more things that you think would enhance, how this library would enhance and better serve our community?
Well, I hope it'll let certain groups use the facilities that I think would encourage young people. If on a regular basis some of the scout troops could use, or whatever other groups of that nature could use, and bring the young people to that area and sort of make them feel that it's part and parcel of their world. I think that would do a lot.
This is, And have I left anything out? Do you have any other ideas that you might want to add to this?
No, I think whoever created this approach to getting people to think about it has spent many hours and done a very noticeably good approach.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and I'm going to end it in a minute.